The studio lights of the view glowed with their usual soft intensity, bathing the set in warm yellows and polished reflections. To the audience, it looked like just another live broadcast, measured smiles, coffee mugs aligned just so, the quiet hum of cameras tracking every movement. But beneath the surface, tension crackled like static before a storm. Kevin Spacey sat at the far end of the curved table, hands folded, posture composed to the point of rigidity. His dark suit was immaculate, his expression neutral, almost serene. Years of stage and screen had trained him well, stillness could be power. He listened, nodded occasionally, and waited. Waiting, after all, had always been one of his strengths. Joy Behar, seated across from him, leaned forward with familiar confidence. Her voice carried that unmistakable blend of humor and challenge that had become her trademark. The audience laughed when she joked, applauded when she pushed. She had done this 1,000 times. Guests came and went, some rattled, some charmed. Tonight, she seemed especially energized. The conversation began harmlessly enough. Career reflections, the nature of public redemption, art versus the artist. Kevin answered calmly, choosing words with surgical precision. He spoke about theater, about the discipline of craft, about accountability without melodrama. The crowd murmured approval, even Joy nodded at first. But then her tone shifted. So, Joy said, lifting her eyebrows slightly, do you think the public owes you forgiveness, or is this just another performance? A ripple moved through the audience. Kevin didn't react immediately. He took a breath, slow and deliberate. I don't believe anyone owes anyone anything, he replied evenly. I believe in responsibility, reflection, and... Joy interrupted, waving a hand lightly. But you are here, Kevin. On television. That's not exactly hiding in the shadows. A few nervous chuckles echoed from the crowd. One of the co-hosts glanced between them, sensing the change in air pressure. Kevin smiled thinly. Being present isn't the same as demanding absolution. Joy tilted her head. Some would say it's a strategic return. The word strategic hung there, sharp and unmistakable. Kevin's fingers tightened, just slightly, against one another. He looked at Joy directly now, eyes steady. I'm here to speak, he said, not to be reduced to a headline. The cameras zoomed in. Viewers at home leaned closer to their screens. Joy crossed her arms. Headlines tend to follow behavior. There it was. The line had been crossed, not loudly, not crudely, but with intent. The room grew quieter. Even the studio crew seemed to freeze, waiting to see which way the moment would break. Kevin leaned back in his chair, exhaling through his nose. His voice remained controlled, but something darker moved beneath it. Joy, he said, you've built a career on commentary. On provocation, but commentary without listening becomes something else entirely. Joy smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. And silence without accountability becomes manipulation. A murmur swept through the audience, half shock, half anticipation. Kevin's jaw tightened. He glanced briefly toward the moderator, then back to Joy. If this is an interview, he said, then interview me. If it's a trial, at least be honest enough to admit it. Applause erupted from one side of the studio. Another side remained silent. The divide was visible now. Joy leaned forward again, voice firmer. People at home want answers, Kevin. Not monologues, and they deserve honesty, he shot back. Not ambushes dressed as conversation. The word ambush landed hard. One of the co-hosts attempted to interject, but Joy raised a hand, eyes locked on Kevin. You're a master of control, she said. But this isn't your stage. Kevin's composure finally cracked, not explosively, but audibly, like ice shifting under pressure. I've spent my life on stages, he said quietly. And I know the difference between a performance and a setup. The audience gasped. The tension was no longer subtle, it was electric. Kevin straightened in his chair, shoulders squared. If your goal tonight is to humiliate me for applause, he continued, voice rising just enough to cut through the studio, then congratulations, you've chosen spectacle over substance. Joy opened her mouth to respond, but for the first time, the moderator stepped in, voice tight. Let's take a breath. Too late. Kevin turned slightly toward the audience, then back to Joy. His eyes burned, not with rage yet, but with restraint stretched to its limit. I agreed to come here in good faith, he said. If that faith isn't mutual, then this conversation is already broken. The studio fell into stunned silence. Even the lights seemed harsher now, exposing every expression, every micro-reaction. Joy leaned back slowly, her smile gone. And in that charged stillness, everyone knew. The eruption wasn't a question of if anymore. The studio lights blazed like judgmental suns as the applause faded. The hosts sat in their familiar semicircle, smiling for the cameras, scripts neatly stacked, coffee mugs untouched. The atmosphere felt polished, too polished, like a stage where something sharp was about to crack the surface. Kevin Spacey sat at the far end of the table, hands folded, posture calm but rigid. His smile was courteous, practiced, the kind that concealed effort. He had agreed to this appearance reluctantly, aware of the tone the show sometimes took. Still, he came, believing in conversation, or at least the illusion of it. Joy Behar leaned forward, eyebrows arched, voice light but edged. "So Kevin," she said, tapping her pen, "a lot of people feel that your recent attempts to return to the spotlight are, let's say, a little tone-deaf." The audience murmured softly. Cameras zoomed in. Kevin nodded once. "I understand people have opinions. That's part of being a public figure." Joy didn't stop. "But don't you think some doors should stay closed? Especially when accusations replace verdicts?" Kevin interjected, still controlled. The table went silent. Joy's smile tightened. "I think accountability matters. So do facts," Kevin replied, his voice calm but colder now. "And so does due process." Whoopi shifted in her seat. Another host glanced nervously at the producer off camera. Joy laughed lightly, dismissively. "This isn't a courtroom, Kevin." "No," he said, finally turning fully toward her, eyes sharp. "It's a television show, and that's exactly the problem." The audience gasped. The spark had landed. Scene 2, the eruption. Joy crossed her arms. "Are you saying we don't have the right to question you?" "I'm saying," Kevin replied, his voice rising for the first time, "that questioning becomes theater when answers aren't wanted." A hush fell over the studio. "For years," he continued, "I stayed silent. Not because I was guilty, but because I believed truth would surface without shouting. But silence gets edited into guilt on shows like this." Joy leaned back. "So now you're the victim?" Kevin shook his head slowly. "No, I'm the defendant who was acquitted, by courts, not by crowds." The audience stirred. Some applauded, others booed. Joy scoffed. "You expect sympathy, I expect fairness," he snapped, the restraint finally breaking. "But fairness doesn't trend, does it? Outrage does." Whoopi raised a hand. "Let's slow this down." "No," Kevin said, standing now, chair scraping loudly against the floor. "This is exactly the moment people don't want to slow down. They want sound bites." Joy's voice sharpened. "If you can't handle tough questions, then stop pretending these are questions," Kevin fired back. Their verdicts wrapped in smiles. The control room erupted in chaos. Producers waved frantically. A commercial break sign flashed, ignored. Kevin picked up his jacket. "I came here to talk."